Hey guys, so this is the week 4 lesson of the YSP spring second grade curriculum, and it's called polymer worms or worm goo, but I just like to call it chemicals or chemical reactions because it's the first time that they're actually being introduced to that word. And before this, they're probably referring to everything as potions anyway. So introducing the word chemical is a big enough concept for me. It's also used to teach what a polymer is, but I feel like that's definitely too much for second graders, especially. So how I like to start this lesson is I define what a chemical is, and I basically just say a chemical is anything that's made up with matter, which means we have to review matter from last week and then also molecules from last week. And then I go over what's a chemical reaction or a chemical change versus what's a physical change. So when I talk about physical changes, if I didn't already introduce it last week, which it probably would help if you did, but it's a lot to introduce all in last week when you're also introducing matter and molecules. But if you did, or even if you didn't, you can still talk about how last week melting and freezing the chocolate was a physical change, even though it looked different, it was still made of the same thing. And then a chemical change is when you make something completely new. So that's the way I found is the best to describe it, that a chemical change, you make something that's completely new that wasn't there before. And in a physical change, even if it might look different, it's still made of the same thing. Using the word reversible to describe physical changes is really dicey because sometimes physical changes aren't reversible and sometimes chemical changes are reversible. So I would stray away from that. I think that'll just confuse them in the long run. So physical means that it's made of the same thing, and chemical, you're making something completely different. These are just some examples, but feel free to come up with your own, especially that are more relevant to daily life. This is a really good video I found that demonstrates the chemical and physical change really well. Um, the website is Generation Genius, and my kids just love watching videos, especially of science, of like things blowing up or whatever that we can't really do in the classroom. So this also helps them understand what a physical and chemical change is, and then I asked them about it after that. Here's some more examples. I asked them, is it a chemical change, chemical reaction, or no? And they can usually tell me. This was my slide about monomers and polymers, but I normally just skip that. So now to get to what actually the lesson is, you get this blue worm goo, this activator powder, cups, water, and paper towels just to clean up. So what I explain is that worm goo, activator powder, and water are all different types of chemicals, but just because you put two chemicals together doesn't mean that they're going to make a chemical reaction. Only some chemicals, when you put them together, are going to react and make something new. So basically, my question and prediction is this worm goo plus water going to make a chemical reaction? And the worm goo just comes in a little blue bottle that you like squirt out into a cup, and it looks like liquid. And when it goes in the water, it kind of looks solid. But when you take it out of the water, it's liquid again. However, after I've done that for all of them, I've shown them that in one cup, putting worm goo in water does not change it because I pull it out and they're like, oh, it's still liquid. It's still kind of the same thing. Then I add in the activator powder into each of their cups, and then this is when I give each group their own cup. I add the activator powder, and then I squirt the worm goo in, and when they take it out, it's solid, and that's how they can kind of see that a chemical reaction has happened. As you can see, this is a complicated topic, but I promise you them seeing like it change into something different is cool enough, and they can understand that just with water it did not make a chemical reaction, and when you added the activator, it did. So that's pretty cool for them. And then to tie it back to last week, but something that is much easier to understand is asking them what kind of properties the worm or the polymer that you make has, and then having them come up with the words that they had reviewed in the past 3 weeks. And that's how you can kind of tie it together with the other stuff about materials.